Thank you very much. And I'll start by saying thank you to Dawn, all your representatives here in the room. I must admit that more than a year ago, when Dawn first started the discussions with some of the representatives of the UN, the question was asked, why is Dawn interested in actually doing something on climate change? And, you know, maybe it's all part of the spreading the message, the news. Well, let me tell you that, you know, since those early discussions and where we stand today, there are 2 or 3 things that have emerged from having a media house with the capacity and the power of Dawn, which seem to be a way of perhaps other speakers have said this as well, other media companies thinking seriously about how they apply themselves to campaigns which are in the public interest, which are in the interest of a country and its future. The messaging that Dawn has brought forth, both in terms of technical understanding of the issues and the importance of the issue, the convening power, and the influencing has been really quite remarkable. But most importantly has been the consistency of the message and a commitment where, again, we've heard earlier of the next year, it hasn't been. And between the conference that was held earlier in February this year and the one that's going to be held next year, there's been a consistent campaign on issues to do with climate, but under climate, air pollution. I know they're discussing population, and one that we hope we'll be engaged with very closely with them on water. But back to, so thank you again. But back to the presentation I've been asked to speak on today about transboundary. When we talk about transboundary, and I want you to look at the region I'm going to talk about just now. Basically, this is South Asia. South Asia at night, you can see how well it shows where the great population centers are, and also where the major ecosystems are of South Asia, along which the cities grow, because the lights come mainly from the cities. And when you talk about a region, I go back to something that somebody asked me many years ago when I was first made a regional director. How do you define a region? Is it the sum of its countries, or is it more? And really, if you want to do something on a regional basis, the answer should be it's more. You respect, of course, the boundaries of the nation state and the political boundaries that you have in any region. But then you look and say, how, if you work from my perspective, my business, which is environment, climate, nature, how does it become more than just the political boundaries of the nation state? And that actually requires a rationale, what you base the more on. That's the next point that I want to bring in, which is what we really talk about when we talk about regionalization and transboundary issues, and then the resource issues that we're going to be dealing with as we deal with the future of South Asia. But first, if we can go on to the country we're in and the subject of this conference. You've heard some of these statistics, but they are grim. 99% of our population breathes polluted air. It causes, you've heard the figure, almost over 100,000 deaths per year, unnecessarily. The top cities of Lahore, Faisalabad, Karachi, and Peshawar are among the top most polluted cities globally. This is not just Asia, this is globally. That's pretty grim. And finally, you've seen the economic loss, 6% of GDP. And we're looking at just one aspect of pollution, the air. We haven't even got to water, the soil, and other aspects of pollution that also plague our country. So back to the idea of getting a region in perspective. Any region would be defined by the geography in which it is located. And in South Asia, we look at the region from the perspective of climate as the big ecosystems that define this region. So we look at the mountain systems, the Hindu Kush, the Himalaya, the Karakoram, the plains and the urban corridors, the Indus-Ganges Plain, and we look at the coasts, and of course Sri Lanka is part of that. The delta zones, the Arabian Sea, the Bay of Bengal. And then if you start looking at what air pollution is doing in those areas, in the mountains, one of the greatest impacts is black carbon. You've heard about black carbon. And this is really accelerating the melting of our glaciers. People speak of black carbon, but where is its biggest impact? It's glacial melt. And that means that, it has dire consequences, and much of what you talk about when you talk about floods. Temperature has a role, monsoons have a role, but so too does black carbon. And then, of course, there's the use of diesel, biomass burning, household fuels, and the cross-border flows that one is talking about, where the winds blow, whether they blow from east to west, north to south. This is all affected by our mountain ranges. Then there are the plains and the urban corridors, the Indus-Ganges Plain. Again, almost the most polluted airshed globally. Persistent winter fog all over, not just across our borders, but all over. And it often exceeds 100 milligrams per million. Key drivers: transport, industry, open burning, agriculture, and it's right across. The wind makes it worse or better, depending on how the wind flows, but it's right across. And of course, it's the dense population and the weak dispersion of the wind in winter, of the fog in winter, which makes this a core transboundary pollution zone in South Asia. And then the coasts. Air quality is influenced greatly by industrial clusters, by port emissions, by shipping lanes, particularly around Karachi, Mumbai, Chennai, Dhaka, and Madras. The sea salt aerosol mix with industrial pollutants again form secondary particulates in the air. And then the buffers of our coasts, the mangrove ecosystem, which for centuries protected us against so much of, storms, surges, etc., has been so degraded that too contributes to the pollution and the lack of storage, because the mangrove tree is actually one of the best plant carbon capture that nature provides. So you cut them down, you release more carbon, you get more air pollution. So let's have a look again at these ecosystems with satellite images. So that's your Hindu Kush Himalaya, and look please at the red zones. And you can see now, left to east, you've got Pakistan, then you've got Nepal, then you've got Bangladesh. And if you look again at the various points, you can see where the pollution is and the red zones. And this is the mountain systems. And it's not surprising, really, is it, that we're suffering from floods and even more glacial melt, because all this contributes to climate change and higher temperatures. The next one. Here are your mountains and glaciers, your northern glaciers losing up to 1 meter of ice thickness annually. 1 meter is a lot of ice to lose, and it doesn't freeze back in spring as it used to. Then you've got your black carbon depositions. You've got all kinds of things that are trying to restore and bring back alternatives like solar, and there are a whole range of adaptation measures, but it's not enough. It's not enough to counter the impact of pollution on climate change and air quality, and you see it in all the red unhealthy zones in that particular area of the mountains and the glaciers. Move on. Next. Then the urban cities and the urban plains, the cities and the smogs, which are mostly all in that upper northern area of South Asia. Again, look at the figures that are coming in, and these are the most recent figures. Lahore, Delhi, Dhaka, Kathmandu. And the causes, you can see transport, brick kilns, vehicular, but all the same kind of sources of pollution in all the cities. And we've got the mitigation measures. Again, the question is execution, effectiveness. Move on. Okay, now we're looking at the plains. This is probably, as I said, one of the most polluted parts in the world in terms of air quality. the Indus-Ganges Plain. And again, you can see all the red spots. It goes, and you can see how bad, in fact, it is even in northern Bangladesh. It's not just our part of the world that is a region that is quite so badly impacted. We move on. Okay, this comes actually from this month, a month ago. If you look here and you start looking at, this is the most air quality index, the most polluted cities in the world. Look at how many are in our region. One, Kolkata, Karachi, Dhaka, and if you want to take Jakarta, Lahore. Two of which are in Pakistan. Most polluted in the world in terms of air quality. I mean, it's really quite grim. We move on. That's the November 2024 figures by NASA on smog. As you can see, again, that mountain area, which is probably one of our most important buffers in terms of climate resilience, is being severely affected by air pollution. We move on. The coastal belt, you know, this is an area that the sea absorbs a great deal, you know, but it has a limited capacity, the marine environment. And again, the more we pollute in terms of the ports, the ship operations, the emission targets, the more we have to restore and bring back to some level of health in the marine environment. So we have projects, I mean, UNEP, FAO, a number of other UN agencies, the governments themselves. There are a number of adaptation measures where we're looking at integrating coastal air quality management with blue carbon restoration, getting the ocean to act as it should, as a sort of sink. But as I said, not enough for the scale of the problem. You move on. Again, the coastlines, and here also you have Sri Lanka represented together with the others, but actually Sri Lanka is not looking bad at all relative to the others, so you're doing a good job. Move on. So the transboundary challenges that we're talking about. The smog, there's a lot of local emission and regional transport, and there's the cross-border smoke, which goes back and forth. But the local sources dominate the entire year. We can't just blame the wind that comes from west, north, east. It is our own transmissions and our own emissions. And we heard, you know, the representatives of the Punjab government saying how much they'd done to improve it, which acknowledges that so much of the sources are localized, and we must deal with the problems in our own backyard. Having said that, we acknowledge that the Indo-Gangetic Plain acts as one airshed, and it requires a coordinated regional response. Reference was made earlier to that as well. The UN can help facilitate regional dialogues. They can have plans and treaties through the global conventions on residue management, and there are a whole range of data sources that can be shared in terms of the response. Can you move on? So, the UN takes its integrated approach in the region, but specifically in Pakistan. We have the Living Indus program that a lot of you know about. We have a national adaptation plan. We have a national disaster risk reduction strategy, and everywhere one fits in with whatever the climate NDC or the climate plans, the climate responses that the government develops through the Ministry of Climate Change. And I'd like to focus right now on the National Adaptation Plan, which Pakistan has in operation, in execution right now, and the sorts of things that would be impacting favorably on the kinds of problems we're looking at. There's a hydromet and agromet information system being developed with all the key institutions in Pakistan that are working on that. There's a cost-benefit appraisal and investment prioritization for adaptation options, particularly in the provinces, drawing on a lot of the Living Indus data, which we already have. And in the provinces, again, we've got in Punjab, clean transport and urban air quality work, and in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, forest stabilization, essentially trying to do a lot of restoration work in the floodplains, in the lakes, and in the forests and on the watersheds to try and ensure that you get much more carbon capture. Let me move on. In Sindh, there's a lot of work going along the coast, both in terms of mangroves and blue carbon, restoration. Balochistan, there's clean energy access, dryland resilience, and in Gilgit-Baltistan and AJK, a lot of focus on the cryosphere, which is of course the one that is affected most by black carbon, through clean stoves and micro hydropower. And then, of course, there are all the cross-cutting measures of the nature-based solutions, solid waste reduction, which apply to our rivers, to our agricultural practices, and a whole range of other natural ecosystems that can be managed and restored, a great deal which would assist with everything, including air quality. So the organizations that work most actively on environmental work in the UN, there's UNEP, the organization I work for, the WHO, the UN Habitat, FAO, and UNDP. All of them have major programs in the country, all of them addressing through whatever the nature of the program, air pollution, air quality gets addressed as well. Right? I think that's it. Is that the last one? Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you very much.